else, so we'll get straight into things. I understand Mr. Kumar is not here, so I'll now invite the Palmerston Public Sculpture Trust, and invite Sue, Simon, and Tim up. Welcome. Just Simon, just the button there to, no, the other on the right. That's it, you all go.
Well, firstly, thank you for having us tonight, and can I say how grateful I am that we're starting after you've had a short break, and how you look all as fresh as a daisy. Actually, while we're on that topic, can I thank you on behalf of us and the city, I believe, to have sat through now 3 days of these submissions. They're very important, but very arduous, I would think, for you guys, so thank you. Anyway, we may not take all of your time, but firstly I'd like to introduce Tim and Sue Mordaunt and acknowledge our trustees Peter Shelton and Susanna Shadbolt, who aren't here tonight, but we're here on behalf of the Palmerston Public Sculpture Trust. So rather than tell you how the work of the Sculpture Trust fits in with the council goals and plans and so on, because I think you know about that, rather than talk about the substantial asset that now sits on the Palmerston City Council's balance sheet that the city has contributed to, but actually the citizens of the city via the Public Sculpture Trust fundraising has also contributed to, and those community contributions are well in excess of $700,000. Rather than tell you about the difference the sculptures have made to the city, and rather than tell you how much, when other people visit the town, how much they appreciate the difference and the impact that they have had on them, I really want to talk about how we feel about the city we call home. So of course we need good rubbish collection, and of course we need good water, and we've got some of the best water in the country, so I'm hearing on the radio, which is great. Of course we need efficient roundabouts and sewerage that's kind to the environment. But none of these things make a home. They make a place to live. So I want my children and my grandchildren to be able to be proudly telling their friends and people from other places around the country that they live in Palmy. I want them to tell them about their home here, about the community, their personal imagination that's been fostered and encouraged to soar. I wanted to write that down, so I had to. Imaginations that soar, that great schools and the public art that they might have lived around have enabled them to have. About beauty and about friendship. These are the things that I really want my children and grandchildren to talk about when they speak to other people around about our place here, Palmy. So the work of the Sculpture Trust is a long-term investment in our home. It adds a lot of things, of the softness to the city, these elements that I've just talked about of bringing us together as a community and imagination that it releases and gives permission to. So thank you for your ongoing support. It's gone on for many years. I think we've been in business for more than 20 years. This probably means I've been here 20 times or something to talk to you. So thank you for putting up with me for that length of time. And yeah, thank you for your ongoing support that contributes to enable us for Palmy to be something that is special, that I am very proud to call home. So thank you very much. Tim, Sue, do you want to add anything?
No, the only thing that I'd say is that in providing a new sculpture for the city, it takes some time. So we have to get a site, and then we have to call for expressions of interest, and then we have to fund it. Each sculpture might take maybe a couple of years before the time it comes. So knowing that we got your ongoing support is really, really valuable to us, so that we know that you're not halfway through something and then you lose the momentum. But no, I think we've really created something for the city. I think that, it's really amazing. So we're very proud of it, and we hope you are too. It's good.
Thanks, Simon. Thanks, Tim. Councillor Johnson.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Thank you. Just a quick question. We've had some vandalism and theft of the sculptures. Have we got any kind of leads on following up with any of that, or is it just a loss, effectively?
I'm afraid we're also very disappointed by that. The vandalism actually was a car being driven badly that took out the Cuba Street installation, so that's not quite as bad as someone deciding, or a group of people deciding to tip them over. But no, the police haven't made any progress on that, or the loss of the Doe from John Doe. So both disappointing that we've lost those. Both are in the process of being, with Tamana and the council's lead on that, are being replaced. So they will come back.
And will that slow down your plans for new sculptures, or?
No.
Okay.
No.
Thank you.
Councillor Barn.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Thanks, guys, for coming in, and thank you for the great contribution you make to our city. Just to follow up on that, I was wondering if the vandalism, theft concerns are something that might come into the kind of sculptures we propose for the future. Is that a consideration that you would talk to a potential sculptor for a site about?
The selection of the sites is a critical part of the process that Tim's referred to, and I think we've always been a bit careful about that. I think probably we need to be a bit more careful now in the future, but building sculptures not only with artistic merit, but actually ones that can stand the time of weather, but also the public, and are safe for the public, are always part of our brief to artists.
Thank you. Thanks again.
All right, that's our questions, and thanks again, Simon, Sue and Tim. You are released, and thank you very much for your contribution from the Trust, and we appreciate everything you do, and your submission will go into the deliberations. Thank you. All right, I'm just going to go through apologies. Do we have any apologies? All right, and I just want to do declarations of interest. Councillor Wood.
Could I do an apology, Mr Mayor, or could I just be an apology for early departure if the meeting runs past 7:30?
Okay, all right, thank you. We'll have to move that, won't we? We just have to get that up on screen. All right. We have to recommend that Council receive the apologies of Councillor Billy Meehan and also Councillor William Wood for early departure. I'm happy to move those. Second by the Deputy Mayor. We will vote, please. That is passed. 14 votes for and none against. All right. We'll now go to declarations of interest, and Councillor Dennison.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Can I declare my interest in submission number 1213, Homes for People, and I'll withdraw for that submission.
Great. Thank you. Noted. Okay. All right. We'll come back to our hearings, and I'll invite up submission number 1213, Homes for People, Darren and Sherry Birch. Welcome.
Right, figured out how to turn it on. That's a good start, eh? So my name's Sherry Birch, coming from Homes for People, along with Darren Birch and Councillor Vaughan Dennison. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for hearing us. It feels a bit like we've gone from the icing on the cake of our community with the Sculpture Trust down to the nitty-gritties of housing. Homes for People was established as a community housing trust in 2016. So I think it was a number of years ago where we met with a number of you and was like, we've got this big idea. So here we are, 8 years later, doing a submission. We're a social enterprise, meaning that we work on business principles to fulfil our charitable outcomes, and we develop social and affordable housing, mostly across the former mid-central DHB region, although we're always open to exploring other things. I'm going to hand you over to Darren for a bit more intro.
Yeah, so since establishing, for those who aren't familiar with us, we are accredited with MSD for providing transitional housing, and we're the largest transitional housing provider in our community. But we set up primarily to develop for first home buyers, and we are accredited with Housing and Urban Development, both with two of our progressive home ownership programs. We run 3 different programs. We now have completed 32 homes that are occupied. We have 5 additional homes that are awaiting title. Altogether, including our under construction and pre-construction, we're up to 50 homes, not including our future pipeline. Through our transitional housing, we serve around 400 to 500 people a year who are amongst the homeless in our community. We make the observation that council has attempted to be involved in affordable housing, and we, in terms of new build and new sites being offered, and we feel that council so far has missed the mark, and we feel that there's a risk of continuing to miss the mark in terms of that. We believe that Palmerston North City Council should join other cities in developing and implementing a model that can access IRS funding so that taxpayers support and subsidise lower income households rather than ratepayers. At the moment, as a taxpayer and a ratepayer, I subsidise Christchurch, I subsidise Wellington, but then I also doubly subsidise Palmerston North. So the model is not, I believe, fit for purpose.
So what a number of councils around the community have done, particularly the larger ones, thinking Auckland, Wellington, Christchurch, as well as others, have essentially worked towards passing their housing forward to some sort of community housing provider that can be accredited for those income-related rent scheme. And we really come here to advocate that Palmerston North City Council do that same. This could either be an existing entity, for example, the Horowhenua region passed theirs through to the Sisters of Compassion and the Compassion Housing, and they continue to do their work as well as doing the pensioner housing in that Horowhenua region. Or it could be a new bespoke trust, and that's the way that our larger cities have gone. Christchurch, Otatahi started 2016, and you go on their website and they're just growing really into really awesome ways, making the most of that council asset and multiplying it and just providing really, great housing for their community. Wellington, 2023, so they're at the very beginning of their journey, and it's really part of their motivation was to financially get themselves to a better place because they were struggling financially. We do have in our region Manawatu Housing Trust, which is a council-controlled organisation. The challenge with that is it's still not actually eligible for that IRS funding, so I think they may also be looking for other ways to do it. Something we just wanted to clarify with the IRS funding, which is income-related rent scheme, is that you can still have a special purpose with your housing. So, for example, Horowhenua, they're still pensioner housing, and essentially when they put their hand up to Ministry of Social Development and say, we've got a vacancy for an IRS placement, they can say, oh, but don't forget, it's still pensioner housing. So it's not anyone who's homeless or anyone on the list. It can be special purpose and special cohort. So I think that's really important to understand because the council has in the past had that focus on pensioner and disability.
And I think from Homes for People's point of view, there's 3 particular cohorts that we would emphasise, and that was part of our Summer Haze proposal as well, the pensioner, disability sector and essential workers would be the 3 areas that I would advocate focusing on. The next step for Palmerston North City Council, if it was to go down this road, would be to decide on a design, organisational setup, and then to look at appointing trustees to implement such a program. There may be optimisation with working across the region. We know that Wanganui's also looking at this space, and having 400 houses and 375 houses could optimise, but we also know that there's challenges working across regions, so it may be easier to have two different entities. There are some other things that I'll take 30 seconds to just identify that we are concerned about council being involved in housing insecurity. We don't feel like council has expertise in that area, but we would see that they could advocate to support others who are in that area to receive greater government funding for particular programs. So we do feel that there's an advocacy role, but maybe not a direct implementation role. We also, numerous times over the last 5 years, have identified different ways that council could be involved in increasing supply of lower income household. Inclusionary zoning, Queenstown Lakes Trust is a model there. Land and funding, Otatahi is a model there. Development contribution remissions, Horowhenua is a model there. And then there's things like rates, rebates, resource and building consent subsidies. So that's just to put that on the record if anyone wants to take up any of those questions.
Okay, Councillor Wood.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Thank you, team, for your submission. You've got in your submission here that you'd like to explore how we might work with the PNCC to assist with developing this model regarding a different delivery of social housing. Just want to understand what you would see your role as being in that sort of space.
So we set up as a charitable trust. We're about $7 to $8 million entity that is held on behalf of the community. And for us personally, Sherry and I established that. At the time, the person who's now the Community Housing Aotearoa CEO said that I was one of 5 people who he thought that could do this in New Zealand. I am very open to being involved in some way and to exploring how I could serve the wider community through an establishment of an entity that served the poorer members, the lower income members of our community.
Right, thank you. Thank you, Mr Chair.
Councillor Naylor.
Thank you all. Just, you made some comments about homelessness, and you had some concerns around it not being council's expertise. I'm just wondering if you're aware of the new initiative that's proposed around some new funding that's in our draft LTP for homelessness, and whether you have a view on the appropriateness of that.
That's really what we were referring to. I think some of the aspects in that are really valid and worthwhile, but we're just concerned about the Housing First model being essentially financed potentially through council. We think that actually if council can advocate for that model to come to town somehow, that's brilliant, but actually for council to carry that can, we don't think that's its role or it's very financially responsible.
Okay, thank you. And just a second question, you've suggested the benefits of perhaps putting our social housing and community trust or a community housing provider or a trust in terms of being able to attract that IRRS. If there is some reservations that people have expressed around it moving out of council's control, and I'm just wondering if you have anything you could add to give some perspective to that concern.
Any arrangement like this, it depends on how you detail the structure. You know, council could sell all of its housing for $1 to a trust, and then they could have preemptive rights to buy it all back for $1 in 25 years' time or 10 years' time or whatever. So contractual arrangements can be created to protect the council asset long term. So I don't see that it has to be a problem. I see that moving it in, it comes down to the nature of that community trust. We refer to it here as a bespoke charitable trust and how that is detailed. So I don't see it has to be a problem at all.
Thank you.
Councillor Johnson.
Thanks, Mr Master. I'll be quick. Just following up on the affordable housing comment that you made, because you had engaged with us to help us provide affordable housing at Whakarongo, and then that fell over, I believe. So can you just expand on that comment you made?
Yep.
Why it didn't work,
So why didn't it work?
Yeah.
To be very public, unrealistic expectations from council we had a contract that you simply could not break even on. We would have lost money to build houses there under the contractual arrangements. The second contract arrangement was totally unviable for delivering affordable housing. The first three, there's a 3-bedroom house at Tamakuku at the moment on one of the undersized sections, 844,000 for a 3-bedroom house. We're currently delivering 470,000 for 2-bedroom houses in the community. So 844,000, we simply couldn't do it. You're wanting a price point for land that we cannot deliver on.
Okay. Look, thanks very much, Sherry, Darren and Councillor Dennison. Thanks for your submission, and look, it'll be taken into the deliberations. Appreciate everything you do. Thank you. All right. Now go to the bid and invite Matthew Jeans, the General Manager of the Central Palmerston North Business Improvement District Incorporated, submission 1207. Matthew.
Good evening. Thank you very much. Apologies on behalf of our chair and some board members due to the change in schedule. It meant some unavailability, but I'm here to be swift and bold and efficient in the final rundown. So we've put in a number of submissions. I will take them as being read, and I will speak to the key points and welcome any questions at the end. All of our submissions have a common theme for which we are mandated for, and that's about not just advocacy, but safety, security and vibrancy within our city centre and growth. So our first submission is around the proposed rates review on the long-term plan. We believe, from the feedback from our members, and particularly landlords, developers and commercial real estate agents, that the current rating system is the preferred system to move forward with. The reasoning behind that is it creates incentives to invest and develop and use the land in the city centre. That will increase trade, jobs, incomes, vibrancy, safety, security. And it will drive short, medium and long-term investment as well, which will attract more visitors to the city centre, increasing vibrancy further, and will stimulate economic growth and prosperity. Moving on, supporting the submission of the CCTV Control Hub 5-year programme. The reason we're supporting this is through the original submission of the PNCC Risk and Resilience proposal for a CCTV Control Hub 5-year programme in the long-term plan to upgrade and expand the current CCTV infrastructure in the city centre, which is prioritising areas that require additional coverage by strategically installing multi-lens cameras with number plate recognition and AI capability in high-risk zones across crime hotspots and key critical locations. That takes the 27 current cameras up to 134 cameras that are cloud-based across the 5-year term. We believe this will ensure swift responses to security incidents and potential threats to public safety, maintain collaboration with local police to ensure incidents are attended in real time rather than after the event, and positively affect safety, security and overall well-being of the wider community. That's visitors and traders and investors and developers alike. Protect and de-risk situations for lone workers with the provision of body-worn cameras, asset tracking for council assets, and monitor equipment fitted with tracking devices. Also monitor and respond to duress and security alarm activations as well. What do we feel the benefits are of this? Well, that's enhancing the safety of the public and employees, and also reducing the fear of crime and increase a greater feeling of safety in the city centre. And it will aid in the detection of potential crime and crime patterns and prevention of crime through identifying potential criminal activity and antisocial behaviour, and protect livelihoods. It also assists police and council and safety and security contracts to respond more quickly and increase vibrancy in the city centre, making it a safer and more attractive destination to invest in, develop, work, trade and visit. And it makes this city a more attractive destination for the development of inner city living accommodation, thus attracting new residents to live in the city centre and add to the vibrancy. Moving on, we're also supporting the submission of the Multicultural Centre. Palmy Bid, transparently have been developing a healthy relationship with the Multicultural Council over the past year, with further plans around city centre activities and events. We think the objectives are for keeping our 130 communities better connected and serviced in one location in the city centre, positively affect safety and security and overall well-being of the community, and interconnection and connectivity, attract a wider visiting audience to the city centre that are attending multicultural events, and develop vibrancy and stimulate economic growth and prosperity. And last but not least is our submission around the proposed Awapuni Library Hub. We're not opposed to the library being redeveloped. We just think that the funding should be downscaled, particularly when the city centre has some earthquake-prone properties, which are key assets, such as the library, Te Manawa, and the Regent Theatre. We believe the large portion of that 27.1 million would be better fed and funneled into the development of those projects, which will attract people into the city centre, create vibrancy, and positively affect safety in the city centre as well. Obviously, all the other properties that I've mentioned require seismic strengthening as well, and I think that's a priority to get those facilities up to the required standard, plus additional developments as well. That's all from me. Any questions?
Councillor Barton.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Matthew, for coming in. Just for context, in all of your submissions, you talk about Palmy Bid as a 1,200 member incorporated society. Just confirming that that's the 1,200 businesses that we rate on your behalf.
That's correct.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah, and so that's a combination of landlords and businesses.
Yeah. So I suppose my question is, how actively engaged in the work of the bid are those 1,200
We're
members?
across about 50% of them at the moment, and still building upon that. So we're still relatively young, as you are aware, and I think across 50% is quite positive at this point in time. We've got a body of work to get across everybody.
What does across mean?
That's through the right style of engagement, basically. Yeah.
Good. So just on that then, the submission, you say your submission was submitted after seeking feedback from our members. Do you know about how many of your 1,200 members you were engaged in this process?
There's mainly the majority of commercial real estate have commented on the rates, and also landlords and developers. Obviously, we understand there's a difference between tenants and landlords in that picture, and we're solely looking at obviously future development for the city on this submission, and the barriers to that from the rating system.
Finally, one more. I was just surprised that you submitted against the Awapuni Hub and transfer that money in. Is the basis of that just that you think that investment should be focused on the central city?
As I said, we're not against the hub as such. We still think the library should be developed, but at a lower investment. And obviously our mandate is around vibrancy and the development of the city centre. And we've already got a city library that requires seismic strengthening and developing some other key assets as well.
Thank you.
Councillor Barrett.
Thank you. Thanks, Matthew. Just interested whether Palmy Bid has any concerns at all about introducing AI into the community?
I think it comes down to how it's managed and how it's programmed. The AI around CCTV is really there to detect patterns of particular crimes and behaviour. So my understanding of that is it can be program to look at car crime, retail theft,
Thanks.
assault, all those sorts of things.
Great, thanks. Would you recommend that council engage with the community around social license to use AI in this community before implementing such a measure?
I think it would be good to educate the community about what it's proposed for and how it's going to be utilised.
Thanks, I'll defer to others.
Councillor Naylor.
Oh, thanks, Matthew. Just your comment that you're opposed in the written submission, opposed to the new Awapuni Community Library Hub. If that money was deferred to central developments, as you suggest, the St Mark's site has already been purchased for $2 million. I'm just wondering if you have a view about how that land could be used.
I think it requires a bit of peel back and further discussion. Our view is maybe the funding towards that could be between 3.5 to 4 million. We think that would be a more reasonable figure. And I understand there's been other submissions around that level as well.
So still do something there, but at a lower cost.
Yes.
Thank you.
Councillor McLeod.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chair. Just one question, Matthew. In your submission regarding the rating system, the rates review, you mentioned that capital value will be a barrier to investment and economic growth around the around the CBD. 71% or 72% of councils around the country use capital value system, and many of them actually indicate, the economic outlook indicate that they're doing quite well as well. So how do you respond to that, or what was your reasoning behind that as well?
Our reasoning was we crunched some numbers on new developments, basically. And we've mentioned Safari Group in there with the hotel, and I think they're currently around 140,000 in rates on the current system. And if you look at the other two systems, it blows it out to 400,000. So that becomes a deterrent to invest in the city centre, and that takes away the opportunity for further investment, jobs, livelihoods, and it impacts safety and security and vibrancy in the city. And our view on that is, with the other systems, that's a detractant to investment, and that could mean those investors and developers go to other regions that they find more attractive.
Thanks for that perspective.
Thank you.
Thanks, mate.
All right. Thanks very much, Matthew. That's our time. I appreciate your submission, and will be taken into our deliberations in the coming weeks. Appreciate it. All right. Our next submitter is number 1181, Bruce Wilson. Welcome, Bruce.
I'm not going to read it all. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for welcoming me. I'm pleased to be here and delighted to see so many councillors in attendance. It hasn't always been the council's history, and it's a delight to be listened to by the majority of the city governance. In my written submission, I answered many of the questions and offered responses to many of the requests for further comment. I might have written a lot more, but I lost a week in waiting to receive a copy of the supporting information booklet. I went downstairs and they welcomed me and said, "There's a display copy over there," which I refused to nick. And they said, "We'll get you one." But it took a week. That was me collecting it because we thought the post shouldn't have a chance to destroy the other week or two. So I have it, but I have some comments to make about it, which is not why I wanted it. It's much less friendlier than the equivalent document from 3 years ago. And that's, for me, a trouble. Because it's difficult for me with the sort of background I've had. It probably is very much worse for many of our fellow citizens. My family know, as well as most people about the town, about the large number of hours that councillors commit in most weeks to doing their job. And I thank you for the efforts you make on our collective behalf, because I recognise what you're doing. One of the good things about our democracy is that we don't have to agree on everything. But we can usually move on sensibly, sensitively and safely to the next business. So I accept that you won't necessarily heed my advice, and you are allowed to be wrong some of the time. And we can all be comfortable in that. I want to address 4 matters that I foreshadowed in my comments in the lovely quote piece in the submission on the web. Any additional feedback you'd like us to consider? So here I am. First of all, transport in and around the city is an area that I've been interested in for many years. It's quite a number of decades, literally. I didn't find on Google any clue to when the Elm Tree service station was proposed. And most of you are so young you can't even remember there being such a thing. There is an Elm restaurant there now and another shop, but it was a service station. When there were 2 lanes of traffic in the avenue and a lot of trees on the roadway rather than on the berm. And that was my first presentation about transport about 40 years ago. Things have happened since then, lots of good things. Almost by luck I discovered there's a draft transport plan on the web. It's not in the written material. It's a shame, it might have interested quite a lot of people because, of course, it's a city of 80 or 90,000 traffic experts. Many of whom, of course, have been speaking out loudly about some of your recent developments with all the wisdom and experience that they've previously accumulated. Anyway, I'm interested particularly in the draft transport plan because it's beautifully designed, and there's a little box out on the right-hand side which is new or one-off actions. Whoopee. And there's a bullet point here stating, incorporate the Enabling Good Lives principles in planning for transport. Brackets, from year 1, close brackets. Now, the submission form that you provided gave a section of general comments inviting comments on transport projects. Good, and I hope you got lots of those. But seeing as Enabling Good Lives, which some of you may never have heard before as a label, comes under Whaikaha, the Ministry for Disabilities, which I have some interest in, planning where there's not yet a project isn't going to get commented on because you didn't ask for that. You almost certainly got comments about the questions in the boxes. And I'm really interested, because of a 40-year connection in the city with the disability sector, in how these principles will be incorporated in planning and how will I know and how will anybody else know. And want to give you an example about how this has lately, as in for quite a lot of years, been overlooked. Think, if you can, and I didn't know that I might have prepared a beautiful PowerPoint, that there's a roundabout at the corner of Broadway and Albert Street. There are lots of roundabouts, but there's one there. And if you're crossing Albert Street, there's protected spaces for pedestrians, sighted or crippled, wheelchairs, you name it. But if you're crossing Broadway, there is not. You take your chances. There are traffic islands to guide the cars, but no hiding place for the disabled. It's not a planning job. It doesn't need a plan. Just fix it. It's a street level job, and it won't actually cost much. I've noted media comments about Featherston Street between Araha and North, and I think, my goodness, did you pause that? I don't expect to be answered, but I was disappointed if that's a correct report. It's a bit like saying the house is partly built, it doesn't look very livable because there's no gypsum there. Wait till the damn thing's finished and then see if it works. It might be a house, it might be a good street. And I could wax eloquent on this topic, specifically focused on there and bus stops and other things and cyclists and pedestrians, but I'll wait and see if I've got any time for a question. The consultation style surprises me. The form invited you to comment on specific things and effectively walled off a whole lot of others. Therefore, how can you know? It didn't make it easy for interested people to look very far. I mentioned the supplementary booklet. Oopsie, I didn't, that's on. I'll keep away from it. Wonderful. Once I got it. My centimetre test says it's about 320 pages. When I got it, I discovered it's got dividers in it, and this may not be what you got, but this is what I got as a member of the public. There are 11 of these lovely black dividers. There's no way of telling except riffing through it. So I've put flags on them. The council might have, it would have done it better than little pink strips, but it would have been helpful. And when you get into it, there are 11 sections there. No contents page at the top, but 2 of the sections have contents pages and page numbers listed. But when you look at the pages, they're not numbered. And then there's another section in there that's got page numbers but no contents table. And so if I open it like that to any page you like and say, I want to talk to you about that paragraph, it's bloody impossible to get you to find it. Really? How effective is that? So uncoordinated pagination's a complication. Really difficult to do. Well, no, actually, if you look at the last one, 21 to 31, it's there in spades. Somebody forgot to think and join the dots, I think. Okay. The consultation document, I didn't fish it out. It's beautiful, lovely colours, but I wonder if you'd ever thought to coordinate it. Page 9 has the 14 plans, and they each have a colour subtly different. But then when you look, say at transport, which is light yellow, and you wander across to about page 22 or 23, where transport's mentioned, it's pink. That's recreation, not transport. The colours would have made it miles easier, not only for me, but a whole lot of these other people who aren't here tonight who might have submitted, and you discouraged. And or maybe this year you didn't need them, but in general you do. We got one of those consultation documents in our system at home, and somebody had made an ink change. I didn't go around the street saying, did everybody else get that ink change? Find that really fascinating. On page 31, relating to the size of lifestyle blocks and how rates might change. And it's so badly done as a change that I can't tell what it means. I can't see the underlying numbers. And when I go to the supporting information, rates, pages 8 and 9, I can't find anything that gives me a clue. Not very helpful, I suspect.
Bruce, can I get you to...
wrap up fairly fast?
Yep, thank you.
Yes, I'd love to. Okay. I want to place on record then finally, thank you, in case I don't come this way again, that I observe what I see, I listen to Mayor Brown from Auckland getting in ahead of you, saying, look at our rates, they've come down at 6%, and they'll be pretty tough for the next couple of years, but it'll get better. And I look at page 25 of the 3-year ago thing, and the unreferenceable similar page in this year, and it's the same trend. It's all over the country. It's going to be tough now, but it'll get better. Until you look at the chart and find that what was predicted for this year, 3 years ago, is now totally out the window. And the graph is the same every 3 years. I can't work out why that needs to be the case, but there it is. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Bruce. Appreciate it. And yeah, your submission and your comments will be taken into the deliberations, and we thank you for coming in. All right, I'll now invite up submitter number 1056, and that's Marilyn Rossiter. Welcome, Marilyn.
Thank you. Good evening, Your Worship, councillors and Palmerston North City Council staff. I know you've read my submission, so I just want to take your time out to summarise a few main points. And I thank you all for being here tonight, Friday night. I've been working since 7:30 this morning, and I know you've been working all day. I've been on an online conference for the last 2 days as well, and it's very hard to sit and listen all day. So, I speak as a mere ratepayer who owns a rental property in the city with an excellent tenant, and I like to keep the rent at a reasonable level. I think rents are already high enough. So I'm talking about expenditure here, keeping the expenditure down, rather than probably it always amuses me, people talk about wanting the rates low, but they want all these other things as well. But my submission is around basically keeping the expenditure to a reasonable level, providing all the services, and not going for all the non-essential projects. So for the rates review, land value is my preference. I feel it better reflects the uniform charge, which is a charge of ratepayers' use of facilities, whereas capital value is a tax on improvements, like a wealth tax. Rating should be on the use of the services, not the improvements. And just for an example, there's many other examples, but I feel that senior ratepayers on superannuation would be affected quite badly. They may have been in their properties for several years. Their savings have diminished over time, and they would have limited ability to pay excessive rates. There's others, families with mortgages, etc. as well. On the community facilities, I do not support any non-essential projects or nice to have at this time when there's a cost of living crisis. And you do have core infrastructure projects that need to be undertaken. So expenditure, I feel, should be targeted at those core infrastructure projects like the Nature Calls upgrade, considering PNCC has a long way to go in upgrading their wastewater. You probably should have commenced that upgrade a long time ago. Anzac Park development I see as an extravagance that is simply not required. The same with the costs for the Awapuni Library Hub, seems exorbitant. There's an excellent library in the city, and that should be able to serve all the residents of Palmerston North. For meetings, there are halls, there may be some spare shops where space could be leased. I think focusing on, it's not a huge city, focusing on the central city and having that vibrant and all the facilities used, the square used a lot, will stop crime. So no nice to haves, make use of the existing facilities. The Central Energy Trust project, I have reservations about the cost involved, but it is a facility that is used by everyone and I know does bring a lot of money into the area. Seismic upgrades. The Minister in charge of earthquake-prone buildings is currently undertaking a review of all aspects in regard to earthquake-prone buildings, and I think the Council should wait and see what the final results of that review are before any work is undertaken. The time period to upgrade has already been extended by 4 years, and I just think, well, we're all sitting here now, the earthquake could happen now. It's a long time since the Christchurch earthquake, so maybe some common sense will prevail about what needs to be done. My comments on development contributions. Council services required for new capital development are expensive, and it should be the user who pays. If there is no demand on council facilities or services, there shouldn't be a charge. Development contributions, for growth costs associated with the Nature Calls wastewater projects should not be stopped because of council's proposal to seek external funding for the project. There are still costs associated with the existing network to be paid, and newcomers should contribute to that. They shouldn't have a free ride. Now, my general closing comments. I see Palmerston as an urban service centre. I've worked in the area for 40 years, over 40 years. I lived in the area in early days and probably will retire here if the rates are not too exorbitant. It's not a tourist centre, it's not a Queenstown. So please just make it easy for people to get around. Don't take away any more car parks from the city centre, no more cycleways. People come here to shop and do business in the city. They want to get a park. They want to be able to get near the restaurants, the shops, the cafes, the bank, lawyer, the doctors, whatever. So I think that's the idea, is that people should know the road code, so you shouldn't need cycleways. I think I've probably covered everything, and I would just like to finish off by congratulating Leonie Harpeta for voting against the Maori wards. I noted there was only one councillor that voted against. I was involved in collecting signatures before the poll was taken, and I know they were very easy to collect, and I don't think anything's changed. In fact, I think it was about a 69% against in the poll, and it would probably be higher now from conversations I have around the city. So I would have expected to see that reflected in the councillors' vote, that I know some people are against, and that's fine, it's democracy, but I would expect it, and some people are for, and that's okay as well, but I would have expected the councillors' vote to actually reflect what the ratepayers are thinking. So thank you all for listening to me.
Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thanks, Marilyn. Just wanted to know if you accept the legality in New Zealand of rates being a tax rather than a fee for service.
Well, I see them as a fee for service.
And do you accept that the courts in this land have ruled that it's a tax?
Right, yes.
You do?
I do accept that.
Okay,
yes.
thank you.
Yes.
Can you describe, is there a relationship between a person's wealth and their ability to pay tax?
Not necessarily. The same as there's not for their ability to pay rates. And there's always cases that are exceptions.
Can you give me an example where wealth and the ability to pay tax are not related?
Probably not off the top of my head. Do you want to add anything, Andrew?
You could have a very wealthy property, but the income that relates to that is non-existent. And just because you've got a high capital value, that doesn't mean to say you have the cash flow to cover that expense.
Right, I'm asking about the ability of a person to pay tax rather than the ability of a property to pay tax.
Well, they're one and the same thing, surely. The property owner must have the cash flow to be able to pay the expected rates.
Thanks for those perspectives.
Councillor McLeod.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks, Marilyn and Andrew, for coming in. I've read your submission, and I just want to probably pick your brain on some of the stuff that you said around nice to haves, because what is considered nice to have to someone might be a lifeline to someone else, very subjective word. And I wanted to sort of get your idea of what are nice to haves in your opinion, and what do you think the council should be doing more of or less of?
Well, I think the council should first of all rate for the services and the essential services for a start, like your 3 waters. But then when I talk about the nice to haves, I think, the library, absolutely exorbitant. I think the Anzac Park, if any of these things were self-funding by parties in the area, that's fine. But there's a nice big function centre here. There could be more use made of that. You should make use of all the existing public facilities. If you could have some of these nice to haves and only put the rates up 5%, I would say, it's a different story. But we're talking about quite a significant rate rise here. And I understand as well $1,000 for every household, which is, I actually didn't get a letter about that, so I'm not really up with that one. But that really makes the rate rise huge. And so therefore, once the services are all covered, yes, maybe we can look at some of the other things. But I just wonder if you are fully utilising some of the council facilities now. Like I know events at the centre and the square are great. The leisure centre is another good place that's very well utilised. I'm not so sure about this conference centre now because, like I say, a lot of the conferences are online. I used to come here regularly 15 years ago for professional development courses, sometimes in the big hall, sometimes in the mezzanine, but now that's all online. So, it's no good building new facilities. And I think centralising everything is really good to keep away the crime, if there's more people coming and going. The same as the arena is a great facility, but, the cost of what you need to do there is quite high too. Have I answered your question?
Thanks for your perspective. Appreciate that. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Thanks, Marilyn. And Andrew, your submission will go into the deliberations. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, number 1114, Fafita Brown. I don't see him. I know Pastor Brown, so he's not here. We'll just put him into the background there. Okay, we'll move on to submission 1125, the Roslyn Commons project. Joshua Parsons. Welcome.
Kia ora. G'day, my name's Joshua. I'm here with some other members and supporters of Roslyn Commons project. We're a community garden based in Holme Reserve over in Roslyn. So I'll leave the submission to speak for itself. I think it might be helpful if I give a very brief kind of background at the start, a bit of a timeline, and then spend most of the time that I'll be talking on kind of the legal scope for a new community garden process. And then hopefully we'll have some time for Q&A. We began organising the Roslyn Commons project in late 2020. We had agreed our site at Holme Reserve with a community development officer, and by November we were just waiting on paperwork for a memorandum of understanding and we were good to go. We had a dig-in date of January 2021. Unfortunately that December the community development officer resigned and we could not make contact with her replacement. Our understanding was all we needed was the rubber stamp. We had permission to go, we had consulted with the community, we door knocked 37 houses and found no one who voiced opposition. So we dug in 2021 in January. In November of 2021, a new garden process was implemented, and early 2022 we were told that we had to get a lease to comply with the new process. So since the City Council seemed to be pursuing us, was putting energy into getting this lease to happen, we thought, fine, we'll go with it. We decided to comply, and we've since spent 2 years basically just getting messed around and delayed, with us chasing the council, pursuing a lease that we actually never wanted. We wanted a memorandum of understanding. So for us, that's kind of fine. We're happy with the status quo. We just keep doing what we're doing. We go to the park and we garden. However, we're aware of 5 other community garden projects that have either given up or have been significantly delayed by the community gardens process. So to us, that says, look, there's a serious issue with the garden process as it stands. And given that community gardens are so core to the long-term plan's 4 goals, we think it's pretty important that addressing this process is a part of this long-term planning. So, to get into the weeds a bit, apologies for this, we have the matter of a lease. So at the start we wanted a memorandum of understanding, which is the same that the Pitt Park crew are on. They have much larger, both in terms of raw land use and in terms of percentage of the park, and much more permanent developments than we have. We were told repeatedly that because Home Reserve is a reserve, it therefore requires a lease. And we were referred to the Guide for Reserve Administering Bodies, specifically page 64, and the Reserves Act, specifically sections 61 and 73, as the reasoning for this. However, Chapter 11 of the Guide for Administering Bodies makes it pretty clear administering bodies can organise reserves as they wish through management plans. So long as it doesn't clash with the law, the process is there through the management plan. Further, page 64 that we were referred to is a table laying out under what circumstances the local administering body is authorised to grant a lease, which is different to when it's required to grant a lease. So that leaves us with the Act to refer to. So sections 61 and 73 were what we were referred to. 61 applies to local purposes reserves, which Home Reserve is not. It's a recreational reserve. Section 73 is about the leasing of recreational reserves for, quote, farming, grazing, afforestation, or other purposes. Again, it lays out where, quote, leases of the reserve or any part thereof may be granted by the administering body, which is different again to situations where it must be done through a lease. In this case also, that section seems to be regarding activities on the reserve that inhibit free public use of that land, or activities that are commercial in nature, where neither our community garden is free to use and free to take from. We don't even have individual plots. And we have specifically designed our beds not to impede public access. So what I would like to refer your attention to instead when we're regarding a new community gardens process is section 53 of the Reserves Act, which is titled Powers Other Than Leasing in Respect of Recreation Reserves. So clause 1A, the administering body may enclose the reserve or part thereof, which it may at any time decide is necessary or desirable to farm or graze or a forest as part of a development, improvement or management program. 1G, you may erect on some portion of the reserve stands, pavilions, gyms or other buildings and structures associated with and necessary for the use of the reserve for outdoor recreation, which we would argue our shed fits that bill. That's where we store all of our tools. We wanted to have a central location at the garden for our tools to be stored so that anyone can come in and access them. 1H, at any time and from time to time to set apart any part or parts of the reserve for gardens, open spaces, footpaths, driveways or picnic grounds, or for the provision of any other like facilities for public recreation or enjoyment, or for facilities and amenities necessary for the public using the reserve. 1L, you may appoint officers and servants, whether paid or unpaid, to oversee this process. And then you especially have this lovely clause in 1O, which is to do any other such things as may be considered desirable or necessary for the proper and beneficial management, administration and control of the reserve. So apologies for getting into the weeds there for a long time, but I wanted to point out that there is a really broad legal scope for a new process, that we could have a broad and permissive and open process for a community to come in and use public land for community gardens without having to jump through all the hoops of this lease process. Given that the current process has caused the community so much trouble, we, along with Reach Roslin and Environmental Network Manawatu, are calling on PNCC to scrap the current process and provide a new process by the end of the year. So we've provided a simple alternative in our written submission, which would allow PNCC oversight, while still giving communities quite a broad scope to use their public spaces for community gardens. So we believe that implementing this would be a really strong step towards those 4 goals that are outlined in the long-term plan, and to the development of these community spaces and community projects within the community. So thank you.
Thanks, Joshua, and I note your commentary there about how you believe we could go through a new process and maybe some of the leading steps there. And look, thank you very much for putting something on paper there. That's very appreciated. Councillor Johnson.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Thanks, Josh. And certainly we've had other submissions and heard from other groups about our process, so yours isn't the only one. The new process that you suggest, you haven't got any community consultation in there. Was that deliberate? Because you said you had done that yourselves when you set up your Roslin
Yeah,
Commons.
we have done that ourselves. Within the rough idea, It was a new community gardening group notifies the council of its intention to garden in a public space. I had assumed with the community gardening group that would be a group from the community. But I realise that that's not clear within that wording, so.
Yeah, okay. So what's onerous in the current process is around having to be a legal entity?
Yes, that's very difficult. So to get the lease, we were also told that we would be required to get liability insurance for the garden. And that requires us being a legal entity, an incorporated society, I believe, or coming under the umbrella of another group. We have had an offer to come under the umbrella of another group, but we're worried about our autonomy and independence in doing that. We want to be able to control our funds ourselves if we have any funding. We don't want to get into a situation where there's some sort of liability process and the umbrella group becomes responsible for something that we've done. We don't want to put them into that situation, but we also don't want to get into a situation where it comes down to a back and forth, and then who legally owns the garden would be the umbrella group and not us, and yeah, we generally want to avoid that. So,
okay, but if that process were to include some community consultation, neighbourhood consultation, that itself wouldn't be too onerous.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Thank you, Joshua. That's our questions done. Appreciate your submission, and definitely will be taken into deliberations when
Great.
we
Thank you very
discuss.
much.
Thank you.
Cheers.
All right. I'll now go to submitter 317. Paul Smiley. Paul.
Kia ora koutou, ko Paul Smiley toka winga. Mr Mayor, councillors, thank you for this opportunity to talk to my submission. I spoke last year to the council regarding the general rate calculations, and it is good to see the council have taken on board the submitters and are looking at a move to what I believe would be a fairer option. Last year I spoke about how the capital value-based system better represents the buying power of the taxpayer as a tax, and so those who can afford those rates. Further to this, I believe the land value system disadvantages lower valued properties. I propose that the lower valued properties have proportionally higher land value over improvements, typically, and so pay proportionally higher general rates. This is because I believe a lower value property tend to be older houses on larger sections with less improvements. Modern properties are on smaller blocks of land with newer houses. This is a generalisation, but one I believe you could see in the rate calculations for under the $500,000 mark. If we consider the three options provided in the rates review, we have the original land value system, and we have a capital value option. And in between, we have a hybrid system. The hybrid system is not really halfway, is it? It's 70% land value, 30% capital. Now, capital is made up of land and improvements. So really, we're talking 85% land, 15% improvements, sorry. The council had said this is their preference, this is their preferred option. And while I believe that unfairly skews the opinions of submitters and voters, it is the reason given is that it limits the extent of the change experienced by most adversely affected ratepayers. You've also said that the capital value option will be phased in, and so this in itself will limit the effect on ratepayers. As I said in my submission, sympathy towards a significant change of rates would have been good a couple of years ago when our rates rose by 53% in 1 year solely because of land value changes. I agree that capping rates increases is a good thing for many reasons. If we consider the other reasons in favour of a hybrid option provided by the council, they are a better correlation to benefits received and ability to pay, reduces the rates for properties that have relatively low levels of improvements on higher land, and increases the rates for people who have significant improvements to a lower land value. All three are reasons in favour of a capital value system, and to a lesser degree, the hybrid system. The capital value option has also, I believe, been artificially elevated by increasing the water rates for this option. In our case, and it appears in all ratepayers' case, for the capital value option, you pay $48 higher for the water, being fresh and sewage, and $70 more than the land value option. I'm unsure of the reason for this, and I'd love an explanation if anybody can give it. Ngā mihi. Thank you.
Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thanks, Paul. Just really interested there in your comment around council identifying preferred options, potentially skewing public perspectives, and just wondered if you could elaborate on that a bit.
Yeah, I think the best thing that council could have done is actually just been transparent with all the reasons. You know, there are some good reasons in favour of land value, and I think the stifling of development is something to consider, but there are other ways to do that. I think lay out all the options, lay out the reasons for the options, and let the people decide. By saying this is our preferred option, it may see people go, well, they've already decided, what's my point?
Thanks. And would you see that as a general principle across consultation with the community, or is that a specific view to the rating system?
Yeah, I think it's a general principle actually, because if you if you have that information available to ratepayers and submitters, then they can judge for themselves and make their own call.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
All right. Thank you very much, Paul, for your submission, and we've taken into our deliberations in a couple of weeks' time. Thank you. All right. Our next submitter is Peter Claridge, number 1188. Peter, welcome.
Good evening, one and all. Thanks very much for having me along tonight, and the others. I'll keep it brief. I'm here just to, well, repeat my submission, reinforce it, probably is the better word. And I know you've had heaps of them. You would have well forgotten mine, but I'm just here to remind you what it is. Okay, essentially, it's, capital value is what I went for. Essentially, it means our rates burden for the coming year were reduced by $190 compared to the current rates. As far as the other options, the hybrid one will cost me an extra $364 than the capital value. And it's kind of difficult to get one's head around the current and future ramifications to the ratepayer. Land value will cost us an extra $546 per annum more than the CV option. And the land value is ridiculously high since the last quotable value mass valuation, which put ours up by 100%. And I just can't understand the methodology and that kind of increase for Palmerston North. When you people are deciding on what you should or shouldn't be done for the short and long-term future of the city, I consider it imperative that your number one priority is the ability for the ratepayers' ability to sustain the cost and maintain a reasonable standard of living for themselves and or family. You have a duty to consider these people who are vulnerable to the community. For example, those on lower end of the socioeconomic scale, those on fixed or limited incomes, and those that don't have the ability to knowledge to consider a balanced approach by way of a submission to council on their intended plans. If the council decides on retaining land value based rating, consider what was introduced by the Horowhenua District Council in the late 1990s. At the time, the council was intending changing to capital value based rating, but due to the widespread opposition of this ideology, based on the unfairness of those that were willing to make able to make improvements to the property, thereby adding capital value to their properties, would pay more rates than those that didn't or couldn't make improvements but still received the same council services. A decision was made to introduce differentials to the land value rate, the amount of differential being based on the amount of council supplied benefit to the affected properties. It was accepted that this was the fairest method of tax apportionment. Right, community facilities. Multicultural Centre, I supported changes, support with changes and comments seemingly required. However, leasing and then spending $750,000 on improvements on someone else's building does not make sense to me. This cost should be on the owner with the proviso of a long-term lease so the owner can be assured that they're recouping their targeted improvements. Pacifica Centre, seemingly required. However, $3.9 million sounds like a hell of a lot of money. What is a fail and what are its benefits? Particularly library, seemingly required. However, meeting rooms, etc. would have to be on a hireage, not freebie basis to the users. The Arapuni Community Library Hub, principles are sound, cost is ridiculous. It needs to be scaled back significantly. Have lived in the Manawatu for 70 years and never seen a need for the welfare centre yet, which was included. There's a large church on Patama Road, which I'm sure would have a hireable hall if required, and army catering, from Linton and portable toilets, etc., if a need arose, which was part of the suggestion in your long-term plan. School and other halls close by would have would suffice in an emergency. Is community space necessary or just nice to have in that plan? The Anzac Park, without a doubt, a nice to have but not need to have at this present, perhaps in the 30-year long-term plan. The legal and very costly nature caused development outweighs this idea 100 to 1. Definitely put it on the back burner for 20 plus years, it'll keep. Central Energy Trust Arena, support with some changes. With a ratepayer spend of $364 million over 6 years, I would be definitely increasing the hireage fees. Improved facilities demand increased returns to claw back, say, 50% or more of the capital costs over perhaps 10, 15 years from time of completion of each stage of improvement. So, what's next? General feedback. I think all the intended projects that have merit in them and would benefit the users and general public to varying degrees. However, in my experiences, costs and timeframes put down on paper are at best estimates only. Just about inevitably they end up costing significantly more and take a lot more to materialise than they should. Longer, for a multiple of reasons. Concentrate on the absolute need, not a nice to have principle. Do not proceed with the Anzac Park proposal in this or even the following 10-year plan. It will keep and not necessary at this point in time. It would be foolish to contemplate it in this plan. Right, city centre transformation. I went for option 2. Basically, do the seismic upgrades and leave everything else alone. To keep the ever-ballooning costs of manageable to the ratepayers. For goodness sake, where's your collective common sense gone, and realise that we all, including councils, have to live within our means, make do with what we've got for now, and reconsider improvements over time, and stop massive borrowings. What about the other option? I believe it just gives the council more reinforcement to justify their $250 million debt borrowing capacity when it's just prudent not to at this point in time. Ambition is okay, you just need to learn to cut your cloth to set your cap. In other words, exercise prudence when times and productivity do not line up with grandiose, expensive ideas. Other comments, live within your means as times dictate. Spend ratepayers' money as that we own. This excludes those of you where money is of no consequence. We all want a positive return on our investments. Do you really believe we're going to get a positive return on these? Methinks unlikely. Development contributions, I just put yes to all of them. There's another comment here to me. My answer is just common sense, and I wonder why it's taking you people so long to even ask the questions of us. General comment areas, visions, goals and plans. I believe you all have in your mind, you consider the best for the population of Palmerston North. It's just that some of you are better at persuading your colleagues to your points of view than others, and this is not always what is wanted by the bulk of the population, agrees or necessarily wants or needs. I do agree with your efforts and consultation on big matters. Well done as far as nature calls. Transport policies, a hugely big ticket item. You need to reconsider lower or cancel spending on the shared pathways, Palmerston North Ashurst and Palmerston North to Fielding. Your $31 million on city cycleways, $22 million streets for people, for example, the huge expenditure on Cooper Street from Rangitikei Street to the arena. I hardly see any pedestrians southwest of George Street. $88 million to spend to meet government direction. What the devil does this mean? It's a huge amount, and is it all needy? Reduce it and make do. $22 million on city street upgrades? I don't think so. Think about value for money on the area. from Main Street to the plaza, a huge expense for basically a continual traffic jam. Water and nature calls. I think you're doing the best you can under the circumstances. It just disappoints me that piping treated wastewater out to sea hasn't gone ahead. All major cities in New Zealand do this with no adverse environmental effects at a fraction of the cost of what we're saddled with. Complicated, costly and fraught with potential land disposal problems. I've seen it happen before, decades ago at Tokomaru. With its then dairy factory land waste disposal scheme, it turned into a land pollution nightmare. Housing. As the city's population has undoubtedly going to increase, obviously they have to be housed. What I see with multi-level apartment blocks going up everywhere I look, and your proposed development of clear land in the stated areas seems a logical solution to an ever-increasing demand. I firmly believe any attempt to develop land for housing that flooded in the February 2004 floods, particularly in the Clovelly, Milson Spillway area, should never ever be considered. It would end up a disaster, not unlike seen in Auckland with Cyclone Gabrielle. Growing our city, on paper it reads very well indeed. I wonder what percentage of the population actually realise what these desirable outcomes and how fortunate they actually are. Well thought out, only time will tell how much the population buys into them. Those that know what they are, that is. Rubbish and recycling. I believe the recycling recovery system set up by the council, particularly since the introduction of the Whirlia bins, is one of the best initiatives I've seen since 1999 when we shifted to Palmerston North. Regarding upgrading the sorting equipment at the recycling plant, what has to be done has to be done. Ensure your due diligence and comparative quotes are done so that the best value for money and future-proofed so it will have a long, hopefully trouble-free life. Food scraps and green waste collection has to be on a user-pays basis. We compost what we can, and what we can't we take to the green waste dump. I'm running out of time. If council proceeds with a long-term plan in its current form, I believe it will put an unsustainable financial pressure on a significant number of households within the city. This to me is a contradiction to your visions, goals and plans for the city. Do I stop now?
Quickly wrap up.
Okay. I'm going to go straight down here to the last two bits. One is PPS, Fulton Hogan. This business are poor operators compared to the Higginses. They're slow to respond to complaints. What work I've seen is barely up to standard. Their gutter leaf sweeping is erratic at best, and we're paying for them. Their management needs a damn good dressing down for them to lift their game, or they're down the road when the contract expires. Lastly, Councillor Wood, a very sensible, practical thinking head on young shoulders. You set a very good example for many of your more mature peers. Thank you. Thank you.
All right, thanks very much, Peter. Appreciate you putting and reading through that. Your submission will be taken into deliberations. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right. Swamp City Roller Derby. Submission 1204.
Kia ora koutou katoa, ko Catherine Parlin toku ingoa, ko No Parles toku ingoa Reti Rapa. Tonight I'm here to represent your local roller derby league, Swamp City Roller Derby. First up, just want to acknowledge the ancestral lands of Mana Whenua, Rangatane, and talk a little about new Swamp City Roller Derby's stance to commit to the active protection of Te Reo Māori. And we attempt to utilise and celebrate the Māori language and customs in all areas of our league. We want to normalise Te Reo Māori and hold a safe space for nurturing and learning about kaupapa Māori. I did think tonight about wearing my full derby regalia, just for fun, but then thought there is a certain odour that comes with roller derby gear and skates, so I'll protect you from that. Maybe next time, or yeah, at a game or something. We all know that women's sport has lower rates of participation and higher access barriers to access. It's even lower for trans women and our gender diverse whānau. Roller Derby globally has an aim to revolutionise the role of women in sports, and Swamp City Roller Derby empowers the roller derby community and women's sport through building an inclusive, competitive and mana enhancing space. It's a sport driven by women, for all women and our gender expansive whānau. I will say that Sport Manawatu's submission and presentation was extremely comprehensive and covered off a lot of the areas that are of interest to our Roller Derby League. So I'll just cover off here just a couple of things about the areas of importance for our league and a couple of observations about the broader, wider sports community. The Balancing Act for the Council in providing quality facilities within the fiscal envelope and maintaining or increasing revenue generation via large events, sporting events, but also ensuring community sports can maintain access to facilities that is regular and financially accessible is no mean feat. We want to acknowledge the excellent collaboration between the Memorial Park Sports Trust and the Council over the last few years in upgrading the skate rink at Memorial Park and the associated facilities, including some really exciting recent lighting upgrades. It's really great for our community. It means where there's a little bit of another access point for us during the summer months, not so much now. We encourage that continued collaboration to ensure this community asset continues to be maintained for us and the other skate sports around the city and the general public as well. Access to CET arena facilities is crucial to build our community. Having access to excellent facilities helps us build our competitiveness, and so we can compete in a global competitive nature, as well as providing a safe space for us to come together and build manakitanga and whanaunetanga for our members and our visiting leagues, our manaheri. We outlined in our submission that access to Arena 5 allows us relatively undisruptive access to train and build our community, while it enables Arena 3 and Whaipami Arena to continue to generate income. So for us, that continued access to Arena 5 and more adequate facilities is crucial. And so really, I'm just here to speak in support of those particular facility upgrades and ask that the council prioritises that in particular and continues to consult us on what the facility looks like. Thank you. That's all. Happy to answer any questions, or we could talk about roller derby for hours, but we've got many other things to do. Thank you.
Okay, look, thanks very much. Just note your commentary there around Memorial Park and having a maintenance plan in place. Is that not in place now?
I'm not too sure. It was more just making sure that it continues to. It is something that continues to. There is a collaboration between the council and the trust. It's been really important, and I think since 2016 when they resurfaced the rink, I see there's a lot more general public accessing that as well as us.
Yeah. Are you on the trust, are you?
So yes, we have a couple of our members are represented on there as well.
Right. All right. Councillor Johnson.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Just a quick one. Tēnā koe. Thank you for your introduction. There's been some differing views on the urgency with which the upgrade to Ballinbarba Halls is needed. So can you make a comment on how urgent you think that is, and if there are any limitations to your use of the facilities at the moment?
So the thing that struck me in the plan was talking about taking away that access in the short term for seismic upgrades, and so really just wanting to make it clear that while Arena 3 is our home, and we're really fortunate to have a couple of permanent tracks set up there when there are other events on, moving over to Arena 5. Really it's probably not super urgent, but just making sure that there's that maintained access is important.
You'd still be able to have access to that space.
Yeah.
And if you're moved over to Arena 5, do you use both halls?
So in Arena 5, there's just it's just the single track.
Oh, okay, sorry.
It gets a bit hairy with the walls in the space.
All right. Thank you for that.
Councillor Barn.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thanks for your presentation. There's been a few comments from users of the arena generally about wanting to have more of a voice in that redevelopment for Arena 5. Is that something you would support?
Absolutely. Yep. We have been involved, but probably I think we came into the discussions relatively late, and a number of our members hadn't been involved in something like that before. So, yeah, continuing to be part of that consultation is important.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
And just to Councillor Johnson's comments, and there was some earlier submissions, if we were to go ahead with something at Arena 5, and it included a new Arena 5, in your opinion, is there any reason that we knock down the existing Bell Hall or the existing, what is, I suppose, termed Arena 5 at the moment?
I think in the short term, it's we wouldn't want that to happen and be left with no access. I think,
Okay.
yeah.
Yep, that's thank you for that. All right. Okay, your submission will be taken into consideration with others and deliberations in a couple of weeks, and I appreciate you,
Thank you.
coming late out here tonight and speaking to it. Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, our next one is Apollo Projects, but I don't think Simon is here. Simon Wall. Okay. All right, we'll go to Mike from Manawatu Basketball. Come up. Thank you.
Is that the right one? All right. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for allowing me to come and speak to you tonight. I'm a 68-year-old resident of Palmerston North, paying rates for 45 of those years. As the General Manager of Basketball Number 2, I'm concerned at the concepts plan for the CET Arena and welcome an opportunity to have input into the final drawings of the plans relating to the CET Master Plan. Just as the GM from Sport 102, Kelly Sinks, spoke to you yesterday in her presentation, setting up a subcommittee to look at what is needed rather than what looks nice is critical to adding value and getting the best out of the new arena development. We applaud the council for its plan to build a new forecourt complex, again, confusingly to be called Arena 5. We already have one of those. But then we are concerned that we're building a forecourt stadium, but then we're removing one court in Arena 4. This is still not going to be anywhere near enough to cater for the growing needs of our sport, let alone those of other indoor users of the complex. With nearly 350 teams that compete in our Winter League, we are already maxed out, and physically we cannot fit in any more games into the arena's courts that we currently use. Unless, of course, we start to play midnight basketball, which is something we are seriously considering. While it is acknowledged that in the council's venue manifest that our sport has 13 courts down at the arena, due to the cost of hire of the Fly Palmy, the $1,500 a time fee we are charged to mark out 2 courts, and the uncertainty as to when we are guaranteed its use, we have only ever used one show court at Fly Palmy once a year, and of course we use it for the 10 Jets home games. In the 5 years at the helm that I've been with Basketball Number 2, we have only ever used Fly Palmy forecourts once, and that was just because Arena 4 was unavailable. Some people may ask, why aren't we using more school gyms for our leagues? The reality is most schools are used by other codes, trainings and community activities, so they're not available for us to use for basketball. Some schools lock their gates at 4 o'clock, so no one's allowed on their grounds. Some schools do not allow their students to play at certain other schools, and some schools only allow games that involve their school playing using their gym. Or we have to continue to change the culture of schools and parents who feel that playing basketball game over in Fielding, down in Levin or out in Linton is just too far to travel. So they default their games. The area we cover in Basketball 102 stretches from Levin across to Masterton in the south, up to Dannyverk, across to Taihape and Martin in the north. So a large geographical area, and one we are never going to get players from Palmerston North to travel to these venues, even though teams travel to us every week over the winter months from those far off places. Looking back at the arena development, as I alluded to in our submission, millions of dollars can be saved by removing the installation of the roof
on the southern grandstand from the plan. Even though having a covered grandstand is in years 6 and 8 of the 10-year plan, our rugby crowds are never going to get back to the sizes we had in the 1980s and 90s. Traditionally, the CET Arena has always ranked lowest in venue polls conducted by the New Zealand Rugby Union, and putting a cover over the grandstand is not going to improve our ratings. If the cover is to be put on the grandstand for the stock cars, then again, I question why. If it rains on a stock car night, the event is cancelled anyway. So a large investment, how can that be justified? Excuse me. The money saved there could be spent elsewhere. Council could also bring in more revenue by better utilising the arena complex during the hours of 8 a.m. to 3 p.m. Our Basketball Manawatu office is currently right outside the front entrance of Arena 4, so we see how little this complex is being used during these hours. We can only assume that current Arena 5 on Waldegrave Street has the same low usage. Providing the arenas to schools, sporting codes and community groups at a reduced cost would at least bring in some money to offset the costs to run these complexes. Some money is better than no money, especially when there is no extra charge in providing the service. Casual pay to play doesn't seem to be promoted as much as it could and should be. Basketball Manawatu spends on average $75,000 a year on venue hire of the arena, and this doesn't include the $60,000 we spend for the 1 week that we host the National Secondary School basketballs. We are charged the same price to hire the courts during the day as it is during our peak time of 3 till 11 at night. Maybe if the cost was lowered, more schools and groups and codes would consider hiring the space. We certainly would at Basketball Manawatu. We're looking at offering walking basketball and mums and bubs groups. One area, though, we feel the council need to look at spending more money on at the arena is providing a safer environment for players and spectators. The Palmerston North City Council's pillar of Palmerston North being promoted as a safe city falls well short when looking at the arena. Basketball Manawatu spends on average $3,000 a year providing security, and that's just for our secondary school league. But fights still happen in the car parks and surrounding streets. Only this week we've had 2 incidences where 2 students were attacked on Pascal Street. Police and council are looking at the CCTV for one of them, and because there's only 1 camera there, unfortunately the footage of the other assault has appeared on social media already, and that was put up by one of the assailants. More cameras along Pascal Street may deter attackers or prevent these ugly incidences happening again. Basketball Manawatu have a mantra of keeping kids on courts to keep them out of courts. Unfortunately, we seem to be failing on this. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. Would appreciate your submission. Just your commentary around you do realise that the LTP's gone out with the draft option of Arena 5 and the backfields realignment and changing rooms. It doesn't have anything around grandstand roofs or anything like that.
Excellent.
I'll just leave it at that. I like the reply. Well done. Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thanks, Mike. Possibly a couple questions. The main one for me really was around your call for a subcommittee to be formed around the Arena Master Plan, and just wanted to understand what kind of interactions there are currently amongst the major community user groups of Arena.
Currently there is a lot of, informal discussion between indoor user groups with regards to the arena, particularly when we get bumped off at short notice because there's a major event coming in and then we need to pack in or pack down. So the courts aren't available for this particular week, even though it's been booked and planned for. We haven't formed any, formal group, but certainly are keen to look at having some dialogue together to make plans when it comes to developing the areas there, particularly in Arena 5. Given that it's very nice to have, but is it practical for the needs of the users rather than the architect saying, well, this looks nice?
Yeah, understood. Thank you. That's helpful, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Arnott.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Has there always been a security problem? Is that quite a recent sort of addition?
In my 5 years with Basketball 102, ignoring the 2 COVID years, yes, it has. Even prior to my coming on board.
Right.
There are a number of fights happening out there. If you want to buy some drugs, go into the arena on a Friday night, well, what used to be a Friday night, because that's when we held our secondary school competition. We transferred Wednesday, our Wednesday-Friday leagues, so we now play our schools league on a Wednesday, hoping the kids will actually go home to bed because you've got school next day. But yes, it has been a problem for a number of years.
And how many sort of instances per year would you say, roughly?
We would have on average at least 5 to 6 that we are aware of.
Okay, yeah. Thank you, sir.
We've actually got a situation right now where retaliation from the Wednesday night fight, the police are down at the arena right now.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
All right, thanks, Mike. And as the other submissions, appreciate you coming in to speak to yours, and you've been here all night, so thank you. And you're on the graveyard shift. You are the last one, so your submission will go into all the other deliberations that we have in a couple of weeks. Appreciate that. And to all the other submitters, thanks very much for hanging around. Appreciate it. All right. Well, councillors, I've actually done a good job. We've finished early. Hey? Hey? Yeah. So we will finish our formal part of the evening with a karakia, and I'll invite the Deputy Mayor to do that, please.
Tēnā koe e te koro mātua, o tira tēnā tātou. Ko ti pai tētahi mea nunui. Sorry. Yes. That was your phone. Very glad it was your phone. Oh, by Joves. Ko ti pai tō tātou mahi. You know, we've come to, it's quite momentous that we've finished the last 3 days, and ngā mihi nui ki a tātou. Kia rātou I tai mai. To those who came and gave presentations, to those who throughout the 3 days also listened in. That was really quite, important to go through this process, and thank you. Thank you to the staff, to our CE and his wonderful staff who have been here the whole time, Hannah, Sina, Sarah, and also to David and Cam. A big thank you to all of them. And I'll finish with a karakia. May we have a really good weekend. And no doubt we're going to be pondering on everything that we've heard and everything that we've read as well. I'd like to acknowledge Whai Jill. Tēnā koe e te koro mātua o mua. Pretty special to have a former mayor in here too, looking like she could fit in quite nicely again. She was enjoying it, but I don't think she does want to. Nō reira, whakarongo ake au ki te tangi a te manu a te mā tui. Tui, 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 tui a. Tui a I runga, tui a I raro, tui a I roto, tui a I waho, tui a ki te here tangata. Ka rongo te pō, ka rongo te ao, tūturu whakamaua kia tīna. Haumi e, hui e, tae ki e. Kia ora. Thank you.
Thank